Buenos días, bienvenidos al canal. Vamos a ver unos clips de la televisión americana haciendo referencia al voto latino. En algunos de ellos, pues, hablan de eso, lo analizan de buena manera. Hay unos, pues, que están buscando encontrar prácticamente un chivo expiratorio del por qué el voto latino subió al 40-41%. En algunos estados, como en el estado de Texas, el voto hispano, según bueno, lo que se tenía hasta el momento, el voto latino fue de casi el 51% a favor del presidente Trump. Eh, Ellos deben entender que de dónde viene esto. Eh, yo tengo bastantes amigos latinos aquí en los Estados Unidos y la mayoría de ellos se recuerdan del año 2012 cuando el presidente Obama tenía el control de la Cámara de Representantes y del Senado. O sea, él pudo haber pasado una reforma migratoria en ese entonces y no lo hizo. En ese entonces luchó por el Obamacare, lo cual está bien, no, con cosas buenas, pero él luchó por el matrimonio homosexual. Gastó mucho capital político en eso y ellos sabían que iba a suceder y qué fue lo que pasó. Perdieron el control del Congreso. A partir de ese entonces, el voto latino empezó a subir a partir del año 2016. Ya he hablado de eso en algunos videos del voto hispano, y, creo que fue el primero que hice. Cómo ha cambiado conforme los años. Prácticamente menos de un 20%, creo que en el 2016, en el 2012, perdón, fue el 18%, lo cual significa que un 82% del voto latino apoyó al presidente Obama en ese entonces. Eh, Pueden ver la diferencia del año 2012 con un 18% a un 41-43% de estas elecciones. El Partido Demócrata debe eh, ponerse la mano en la conciencia de que el, el votante hispano los ha apoyado y no ha sido recíproco. El apoyo ha sido mínimo. eh, Muchas personas pues tienen la percepción de que sí los han apoyado y ha sido mínimo. Respecto digamos, cuando el presidente Obama, cuando vio ese descenso en el apoyo latino para los demócratas, que fue lo que hizo, fue eh, firmar una orden ejecutiva cerca de los Dreamers. Los Dreamers pues, son menores, está dirigida o estaba dirigida a menores de edad que fueron traídos acá cuando estaban pequeños y se les dio permiso de trabajo. Eso fue respuesta también por una propuesta que estaba en el Senado, de parte del senador Marco Rubio, de hacer algún cambio con respecto a la migración. Eh, Cuando el presidente Obama vio esto, pues se cambió su forma de pensar y aprobó eso, lo cual está bien, es eh, algo muy bueno para nuestros jóvenes. Pero en sí, el hecho de que él apoyó otras cosas y no apoyó una reforma migratoria cuando tuvo la oportunidad, a muchas personas no se les ha olvidado. Estoy hablando de las personas que ya tenemos bastante tiempo aquí en los Estados Unidos, pues. ¿Ya? Somos personas que ya tenemos 30, 35, 40, 50 años acá. No estamos hablando de digamos, las personas que acaban de venir acá. La mayoría, pues, eh, no tienen sus documentos, pero los que sí ya tenemos nuestros documentos aprobados, muchos recordamos eso. Eh, Vamos a verlo. Eh, por favor, suscríbanse al canal. eh, es importantísimo para nosotros. denle like para que YouTube pues lo recomiende a otras personas y suenen la campanita para recibir notificaciones de los de próximos videos que hagamos. Se los agradezco mucho, que tengan muy buen día y que Dios los bendiga. Gracias.
Democrats need to be mature and they need to be honest. And they need to say, yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men, things we've all been talking about, who do not want a woman leading them. Might be race issues with Hispanics. They don't want a black woman as president of the United States.
Big story that we're seeing this evening that's playing out in some of the exit polls, and that is the story of Latino voters. For them, the most important issue that we have seen is the economy. And you can see there tonight, Harris does have a slight lead with Latino voters, but take a look at Trump there at that 45%. That's what he's gotten this time around, 2024. You look back, though, on 2020, and Trump only had 32%. So he has made immense gains this time around with Latino voters, particularly Latino men. National exit polls have shown that he's gotten more than half of those men voting for him. And I think this is going to play a big role later tonight. We're keeping a very close eye, of course, on Nevada. 17% of the population there is Latino and Hispanic. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. And Trump's gains with this group of voters really could make the difference in Nevada and potentially some other states as we continue to watch these very, very close races tonight.
We truly believe that the Republican Party platform 100% is what the Latino community needs, because we are family oriented and we believe in those principles, just period, end of story.
One of the very important keys to Donald Trump's victory was getting a larger share of votes from Latinos. Our CBS News exit poll showed Trump got 45% of the Latino vote. That's 11% more than in 2020. Now, that may be a record for a Republican presidential candidate. The last one to get such a large share of Latino support was former President George W. Bush, and that was back in 2004. He was the last GOP candidate to win an overall majority of the popular vote. We want to talk about this now with CBS News political analyst and GOP strategist, Leslie Sanchez. I know you've had a very late night, too, Leslie. Good to see you this morning. But we have to talk about that Latino vote. You know, despite the racist comments that were made at Madison Square Garden very recently, he still received a big share of the Latino vote. I'm curious about why you think that is. At one point, someone on Team Trump said, listen, Latinos and Hispanics can take a joke. Do you think it was that simple?
I think it's a long time coming, Gail. You know, I wrote a book called Los Republicanos, Why Hispanics and Republicans Need Each Other back in 2007, talking about the idea of a realignment, the idea that the Latino population, as they were here for multiple generations, 2-3 generations, they were very much in line with Republican values, conservative, family-oriented. Many of them served in the military. But what was distinctly different that I think from then and what I know now and what we all see now is this is an economic argument. This is more and more Latino families who are in that middle class, that working class, who feel they were left out politically, and they want to start having a voice. You're seeing that ripple effect in South Texas. It was happening over the last couple of election cycles. Donald Trump was doing well. As analysts, we were trying to determine, was this a Donald Trump effect or was this a Republican kind of conservative effect? And what we found is it's a movement. It is part of this working class movement, and Trump has leaned into that. That's the growth you're seeing. So remarkably, to the final point, across the board, from the Sun Belt to the Rust Belt, you saw shifts in Latino voters, predominantly Latino men, moving to the Republican side and guaranteeing this big landslide victory.
Leslie, as Gail mentioned, those comments at the Trump rally at Madison Square Garden were offensive, and that was a reflection of what we saw throughout his campaign. You wouldn't describe it as decorum, especially over the last few weeks. Some would say the campaign became unhinged, and former president, now president, became even more unhinged. As a Republican strategist, how would you like to see him in office the next 4 years? Would you like to see him be more presidential and leave a legacy that isn't stained?
You know, the interesting part of that question, especially, I'm going to give it specifically to the Puerto Rican. It was a Puerto Rican disparaging comment that you're alluding to that a comedian made at a Trump rally. But in speaking to Puerto Rican voters, for example, in the suburbs of Philadelphia, they would say, you know, in 2016, I voted for Trump. In 2020, I didn't like his style. I moved away from him. I voted for Biden. But this time, I'm going to come back around and vote for Trump. Do I like his comments? Absolutely not. It's not what I want my children to hear, but I feel it's my responsibility to guide my children. I want him to control and guide the economy. That's how a lot of voters felt. It doesn't harken back to a day when we looked at the president being a certain type of model. This is a very disruptive type of president. We know that. And fundamentally, people heard the disparaging comments about Mexican Americans in 2016, you know, crossing the border and all these different things. But they felt that he was not speaking directly about them. He was speaking about a problem related to a porous border. So that distinction happens in the Latino community, and that's why he does garner such tremendous support.
So that distinction that you're talking about, Leslie, is so interesting to me. And I've long wondered, and we've talked about this privately, if now both parties need to stop thinking about the Latino vote as a monolith, because you mentioned Puerto Ricans, and that is very different, for example, than the way perhaps Cubans might vote in the state of Florida, a state that you know very, very well. And that is different than the way, for example, Dominican Americans here in New York City might vote, because the issues are different. And I think for too long, operatives have treated the Latino vote just the same way that they've treated the black vote as a monolith. And maybe it's time to think about it a little bit differently. How do you see it?
It's time to think about it differently. It's time to start thinking about us as Americans, right? The idea that we're broken down into those different ethnic groups and siloed is not what Latino voters particularly are looking for. The important number with Donald Trump in this election was 45%. He earned 45%. That's historic amount of his support of any Republican presidential candidate in history. He didn't win 50%, right? He didn't get 51%. But when Republicans, especially at the top of the ticket, can get in that 45% range, they win down ballot and they win in landslides. I think you saw it in the Sun Belt, and it's moving its way across the country. So to your point, issues that are important, economy was important regardless of their zip code, of their heritage, of their place of origin and place of birth, or even the language they spoke at home. These are working class, middle class families that have really been struggling and are looking for a way out.
Leslie, before you go, are you personally okay with how he behaves as a Republican strategist? Is there ever talk amongst yourselves that, boy, I wish he wouldn't do that? Or are you okay with how he moves in the world?
Yeah, I come out from the Bush Republicans, Gail. You know, I've been part of the Republican Party as long as I've been voting. And this is not, you know, I was a Ronald Reagan Republican. This is not the way. And the reason I decided to go into public service, I expected different types of things. I was among a group of women who had a really difficult time with the style of former President and now soon to be President Trump. But I tell you, as time has changed, I feel his leadership is the right type of leadership for all communities, and especially my community, because on the fundamentals of improving the economy, getting inflation down, and securing the border, he's the right person for the job.
A lot of people agree with.
He's been one of Donald Trump's most outspoken supporters throughout the campaign and was in attendance last night at the Trump campaign's watch party turned victory celebration. He's also the ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, good morning. It's nice to have you with us.
Good morning.
So let me just start with your reaction here. This was a sweeping victory for Donald Trump, for Republicans. What's your reaction, and how do you explain what we saw last night? You yourself had said you expected a closer race than this one.
Well, everybody did, right? I mean, that's what we certainly being told by pollsters. And I think eventually we're going to learn our lesson here. But what I'm most impressed by is not just the size of the victory. I know the number's still growing, but the way Donald Trump won this election. He won it by fundamentally remaking the Republican Party, but I hope also revealing to people that for voters in the United States of America, their primary identity is not their ethnicity, it's not their race, It's what they do for a living. It's who they are in their daily lives. Well, I just saw a moment ago you had a segment on the Hispanic vote in all these different places. And, you know, every expert in the world was saying, well, there's no way Donald Trump can even be competitive because Bad Bunny is not supporting him, and Jennifer Lopez and George Lopez, whoever come out against it. You know, I said these people are workers. These people are fathers and mothers, and they have children, and they own small businesses, and they're employees of a company who's sending a job overseas. They have to be appealed to as Americans because that's what they are. And when these migrants come and they're criminals in their own home country, say somebody comes here from El Salvador and they're a criminal, they're not criminals because they're migrants, they're criminals because they're criminals. And then they're coming here. What neighborhood are they going to? They're going to these Hispanic neighborhoods. That's what we heard in Pennsylvania. That's what you saw Osceola County put up a moment ago, which is an enormous community, a strong Puerto Rican presence. They're very concerned about the cost of living, the cost of groceries. And Donald Trump appealed to Americans as Americans, irrespective of your background or your customs or what music you listen to or how your last name is pronounced. This is more than just a realignment. I hope it's a realization that when you come to this country and you put your roots down here and you raise your children here, you become an American. And everything from our economy to our safety to our national security matter as much to you as they do to anybody else in this country.
Sir, do you think this is a permanent realignment for these voters, or do you think that this is unique to Donald Trump?
No, I don't believe in anything's permanent anymore because American politics moves so quickly and so rapidly. I saw again a moment ago, talking about Miami-Dade County. I mean, Miami-Dade County flipped from 2016 to in about 8 years, this dramatic turn. So nothing is permanent. I think.
So this morning, Donald Trump is not just president-elect again. He just became $1 billion richer, at least on paper, as social media stock DJT surging ahead of the opening bell. In just moments ago, you can see that's not all that's up. The Dow now up nearly 1,300 points. All right, let's go over and talk to our friend Harry Etten, not looking at his 401k here, but looking at where and how the economy played in this election.
Yeah, I wish I was $1 billion richer. Look, James Carville said it best. It's the economy, stupid. And take a look at how folks felt about the condition of the nation's economy. 67% of voters said not good or poor. Awfully difficult to win when that 67%. And how did those 67% of voters vote in this election? We see, look at this march. Yeah, you can't win. I mean, look at that. Donald Trump, what is that? That's a 40-point margin among those who said that the economy was not good or poor, and that was the vast majority of voters. Now, I want to dig in a little bit deeper. I want to look at Latino voters and what they said was the most important issue for them. Look at this. 40% of Latino voters said the economy was their number one issue. And how did they vote, those who said the economy was the top issue? We can see that they overwhelmingly by a 2-to-1 margin chose Donald Trump. We know from the exit polls that Latino voters, there was less support for Kamala Harris than any Democratic nominee on record since we started conducting exit polls in the early 70s, and I think the economy had a lot to do with it.
Just those two numbers at the beginning, how people rated the economy and how people who rated the economy voted. If you only knew that, you probably could have predicted the outcome of the election.
It turns out it is the economy, stupid.
All right, Harry, thank you very much. Let's go over to Phil Mattingly now at the Magic Wall to find out how and where these sentiments on the economy play the most.
What's so fascinating about this, we've all heard Democrats very frustrated because when you look at the top line macroeconomic numbers, there's every reason for somebody to feel good about the economy. Why aren't people feeling it? You would hear over and over again. For months, I've been staring at Pennsylvania because despite those good top line numbers, I'm going to pull up every county here where you see darker counties. That is where cost of living is, the wages and wage growth has not kept up with cost of living. The darker the county, the more difficult it has been for the people that live in that county. Now, I see you smiling. You see what I'm doing here because when you overlap the results from last night, counties that Donald Trump did very well in, counties that Donald Trump flipped, you will be very surprised to learn that right here and right here and right here in particular, but also right here, and now I'm going to show you. This was a county that in 2020 was Joe Biden County. In 2024, Donald Trump flipped the county and flipped it by a sizable margin. What about Erie? This was a county that was Joe Biden County. Back in 2020, won it narrowly. In 2024, he flipped it back into Trump's category. This was a county that was, in 2020, a Joe Biden county by a pretty substantial margin, more than 6 points. In 2024, it was flipped into Donald Trump's column. This is interesting based on what Harry was just talking about. This is Berks County. You move over here into Lehigh County. These are two counties where the highest level of Hispanic vote within the state, 20 to 25% in both of these counties. While Democrats were able to hang on to Lehigh County, this margin right here in Berks County, 55% to 43.3%. It was part of that kind of string of counties in the blue-collar center of the state, outside of the collar counties, where Donald Trump improved his margin in every single one of these counties. And again, I just want to show this real quick one more time, because it's wild to look at when you get a sense of, if people in Pennsylvania are frustrated about the economy, it turns out when you track where their wages were versus where the cost of living was, and you look at where the darker counties are, much of which not only Donald Trump improved on, but flipped those counties entirely, you understand not everyone was feeling it. Not everyone was feeling it in various parts around the country, but particularly in what both campaigns acknowledged was the most important state in this election, and a state where Donald Trump has, by all accounts, done better than he has in either of the prior two elections, and flipped several counties that either Joe Biden wrested back control of back in 2020, or flipped, like Monroe County, the county entirely. John?
Such a good demonstration of how the economy mattered in the places that mattered most in this election. Let's now look at the right camera and also bring in our panel of experts here, starting with Matt Egan, because I got to say, investors like something this morning.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Wall Street is starting this next Trump era with a bang. We see the Dow up more